Hello, welcome to this next Marvelous Designer tutorial. In this tutorial we're going to do a slightly more complicated dress garment, kind of a medieval dress with a corset or stays around the a bodice part and a skirt. So let's have a go. So first of all, I'm going to pop my avatar in, so double click on that, there we go. Then let's just do a quick zoom in. I'm going to hide the library there just to give myself a tiny bit more space. There we go. Okay, so we'll start out with the polygon tool, and I'm just going to draw half the front. So it's going to be quite flat. It's not going to be very shaped over the bust, but we'll need to shape it around the waist. So I'm going to start somewhere around there, I think, just about the armpit height or level. And I'm going to take it down just a little below the waist and then take it across and back up again. Whoops, that was too low. Okay, let's grab that point with edit pattern, just pop that up a little bit. There we go. Okay, so that's sort of half our front, and we can select our middle line, right click and unfold with symmetric editing. There we go. Now I want this to be a single line, so with that in mind, we'll go to smooth curve and just click on that point and move our mouse out to smooth that out. Now that makes it 3 lines, which is no good at all, but we can fix that. If we select a point and right click, we can convert to a curve point, and that will take it away from being like a pattern point into a curve, and that will just give us 1 line there, which is perfect. Okay, so if I now copy this piece and then right click and mirror paste, we'll get the back, or at least the start of the back. Then I'll just drag this down a little because I don't want that peak at the back. And now we need a piece to join them together. So for that piece I want it to be this length. The reason I want it to be the same length is because, you know, when you're sewing 2 patterns together, the closer to the same length they are, the better. Otherwise you tend to get a little bit of weirdness as things pull or, you know, push against each other. So this is 281.5, that's over here in the properties panel. And now I just want a rectangle of 281.5 height. So height 281.5, and I think we'll perhaps give it 75 width, and then click OK. Right, let's pop that into place. So this piece I want to copy over to the other side. So I'm going to right click, copy, and right click, mirror paste, but I do also want to set them up to be symmetrized. So after you've done that, just select both pieces and then right click and symmetric pattern with sewing. It's quite hidden here, but it says apply linked editing and then symmetric pattern with sewing. And now when I sew it up, it's going to, you know, sew both sides and save us a little bit of time. So let's press Shift F to get our arrangement points up, and then we can start to arrange these pieces. Oops, sometimes it's a little bit difficult to get them in, but yeah. You see this one symmetrized, so that's perfect. This one I'll move out of the way so I can actually see the body pieces. There we go. And then we'll pop this one on the back. Right, and Shift F to turn them off again. And now we can sew it up. So let's do it in the 3D. So segment sewing, that one to that one, and that one to that one. Oops, click there, there we go. And that's it, already all done. Okay, so when we press space on this to set the sim going, it's going to sim and it might fall off of her, but that's okay. It's fairly normal at this stage. what we'll do in the next bit is have a look at how we sort that out. But let's press space just to let it go. There we go, and you'll see it's there. It's all clothy and it's all floppy and not very useful. But in the next one, what we'll do is just adjust this pattern to make it work a little better. Well, much better. Okay, so I'll talk to you. Okay, so we want to fit this a little bit, and you can see that the front needs to perhaps go up a little bit. So with the edit pattern, I'm going to select this line and this point so that they maintain good size or an equal size here, and just move those up with my arrow key. Just 1, 2, perhaps 3, 4 moves. Then I'll press space, and that's going to give me a little bit of extra flexibility to pull this up and have it stay where I want it. Okay, so what else do we want to do? Well, I think the back may be too wide. So if I grab this point and or this line rather, and move it in just a little, and there we go, that'll tighten up a bit, and then perhaps just a little adjust on the front. But one of the main things I want to do here is to stiffen the material, because this is very clothy, and it's a bodice piece like stays or a corset, so I want it to be stiff. So with this fabric, if we select that, I'll rename it to Bodice B. There we go. I'm just going to turn the sim off. There we go. I'm going to go down to the presets and use the file browser for this one, and we'll pick a stiffer material. So you can have a look, see which ones you like. I'm particularly fond in this particular application of the trims actually. So the trim full grain leather. So if I click OK on that and then let my sim run, now I'm getting much more of a bodicey kind of effect. It's quite stiff. It's not clinging to the model. It's not folding. It's doing almost exactly what I want it to do. Okay, so what else do I want to do here? Well, this peak here I will sort later. While I'm symmetrized here, I don't want to do anything really with that. Yeah, but apart from that, I think it's alright. Okay, so what should we do next? Well, let's just give this a little colour to sort of distinguish it from everything else. So next what we'll do is work on the skirt piece, and for the skirt piece we'll cut a hole in a circle and then sew it back up, and we'll do that next. Yeah, so I'll talk to you then. Okay, so let's add the skirt piece in here, and just hidden the avatar for a moment. Let's put it back with Shift A. And I want to know how long this waist piece is. So if I select each of the lines associated, we have a symmetric line length over in the properties, and that's my that's my line length, or complete line length. So it's 773.4. So if I click on this ellipse tool, we'll just left click into the viewport, switch to circumference, and it's 773.4. There we go, and click OK. And now with the edit pattern, I'll double click to select the outline, right click, and offset pattern outline. We want about 500 millimeters. Make sure create internal line is selected, and then click OK. Now we can double click on that internal line, right click, and convert to a hole. And now we have the skirt piece. So I'll just drop that down, and then click in it in the 3D view with, make sure the sim's off, because otherwise it won't appear, or the gizmo won't appear. So I'll rotate that around, doesn't have to be perfect, and just get it up into more or less the right place. Okay, so to sew this up, I'm just going to hide the main avatar. So click on her or him and press Shift A, and let's start to sew this up. Okay, so we want the free sew tool to this because we've got 4 or 3 edges on each side to sew to on the bodice, but there are only 2 down here, and I think this is the sensible way of doing it. So I've clicked on the middle point of the front, and then click on the end point, and then we'll do the same down here, and you'll see there's a little blue dot comes up, and that's suggesting the proper seam length. So we'll click on that little dot, and then we'll do the same for the other side, and the same for the back. There we go. Now, even though we've got symmetric editing on with sewing, it's not done the other side, and that's because while these are symmetric and linked, this isn't. It's one piece, so it doesn't know what corresponds to what. So what we need to do is just do the other side as well. So we'll just repeat that with the front. Oops, having a pause, and the side panel, and finally the back piece. There we go. Okay, so with that done, we'll press the space bar. We'll just let that settle. Now you can see that the pattern's so wide it's intersected with our hands, so we can just pull that out and let it drop. There we go. Okay, so I mean that's essentially the skirt part. Not an awful lot more to do there. So what we'll do in the next bit is I'm just going to extend that by putting a trim on it, which I can texture more easily. So we'll do that in the next part. Okay then, so I want to put a trim around the bottom, and it's we need to measure it first. So I'm just going to double click on the outside and check my 2D line length. It's 3915.6. So then we want a rectangle, and just left click in the viewport, width, what would we say, 3915.6, and perhaps we'll give it 100 depth, just to give it a, enough space. On trims and such like, there are 2 reasons I like to give that space. One of which is that, at this kind of level, if it's too thin, it will have very little geometry in it, and so will sim strangely, or possibly not quite sim as well as I'd like it to. And secondly, I'm going to eventually texture this, and having a wider strip is going to give me more options in that respect. So let's click OK on that one and let it think about it for a bit. There we go, auto saved in the middle, and now we can sew it up. So I want to sew it from the back to the front, and these edges on either side are going to be at the back. So let's use M to N sewing here. Well, actually no, we can use free sewing, it's just easy. So I'll click on the back point and come round to the front, and then up to the back again and click once more, and then from side to side on the skirt piece. Then in the 3D view, I'll click on the skirt piece, or the trim piece rather, right click, and then superimpose side, and that should superimpose in the right spot. So it's overlaid it. No, it hasn't overlaid it, it just looks like it had, or it looked like it had to me anyway. So I'm just dragging it down just to make sure that that isn't crossed over. If it is crossed over, I can go to edit sewing, select the sewing seam, right click and reverse. So if I do that, see, that's what reversed looks like. and if I reverse it again, it should come back right. Okay, so I'll press space, let it sim, and that will join up, and there we go. Okay, so that's our trim piece. Might give that a slightly different material property in a moment. But I think the next thing we'll do is we'll put some different material properties on here and have a look at the effect that that makes. So I shall talk to you then. Okay, so we have a few kind of options here. So let's go to our library and just go to fabrics. And if we select over these, we can see the kind of properties for our materials. So for this default one, for example, the weight is 300 grams per square meter, and for this cotton it is 246. And you can go through these and pick up what's heavier, what's lighter, and have an idea of just how something is going to behave. So the thickness side of things is purely rendering. If you have your render settings up here set to thick textured, there we go. So now we can see both sides of the cloth. So if I select the skirt fabric and then find something that's got a bit of thickness on it, so that's 0.3 millimeters, 0.62. Like something that's a little bit more extreme. Well, let's go 0.62 then. Wherever that one's gone. Oh, 0.55, that will do. So we'll drag and drop that onto there. And there we go. So this one, this cotton fab here, it's nearly 400 grams, so it's quite heavy. It's woven, it's quite stiff. It's really going to have an effect. So just have a look at these and get the feel of them, and find the one that looks good for you. So we have fur here. That's quite exciting. Let's drag and drop that fur on and see what that does to us. Some of it will be quite subtle because this is it's a skirt. There's a lot of material to it, so it's got a certain weight. Even if the material itself is light, so the more material you have in something, the more things get affected. So what else have we got? What's this? Some sort of acetate. So let's drag and drop that up there. There we go. That's got some sort of opacity component to it. But let's have a look a bit further down. There we go. I think that's maybe what I am looking for rather. There we go. That's made it a little bit fuller. Okay. So it's at this point in time I kind of try and make a decision about the trim. So do I want the trim on the same material, or do I want it on a different material? Because you can affect the way the whole thing looks by putting it on a different material. So let's just add a new one here, and we could I saw trim there. Where's trim gone? There we go. So we've got our trims down here, and I suspect this one will be the leather one. Let me turn the sim off so that it might give me a preview. No, not going to give me a preview. Okay, so if we drag and drop that one onto there, and then drag and drop that onto the trim piece and let it sim, you'll see that that has quite an effect on the skirt. And if you're looking for that effect, that's the sort of thing you can do to get it. So having that separate zone gives you not only texturing options, it gives you options to change the shape of things. Okay, so I'm not going to go that extreme. Let's actually pop that back on the original rib one, and that will be fine. So experiment. It's more or less the only thing you can do really, unless you're really knowledgeable about materials and fabrics and such like. But I've found that as I've used more and more and experimented and just tried to see what does what, you eventually get something that looks really nice. I think this rib one is probably not right. This one I don't need anymore, so I'm just going to delete unused up here, and then let's go and find a suitable cotton one. I think let's go up cotton. So I want it to be quite heavy, so that's 230. This one's 380, so let's drag and drop that one on there, and that should relax out. And you might notice that actually from the drape that we're getting here, it looks different to the original drape, and that's because if you sort of drape it down, you can change the material and change it back, and it won't look the same because the intermediate material has moved it so much it won't go back to its original shape. So just to get the original shape, I'm going to right click here and deactivate pattern and sewing, and then on our main skirt piece I'm going to right click and reset to 2D arrangement point. I'm just going to rotate that round and pop it back into place, perhaps a little bit further back. There we go, and then press space to let it sim. Pull it off the hands again, there we go, and pull it off the hands, and then on the trim I'll click on it, right click and activate. Now it should fall much more like it was originally. There we go. Okay, so there we go. Just experiment with materials, just try it, see what happens, look for what you like. The more you do it, as I said, the more you'll get used to it. Okay, so next I want kind of a shirt piece here, like a shirt that's under the bodice, so we'll have a go at that in a few moments. Okay, so let's pop in a shirt here, and I'm going to unhide my avatar. Whoops, that slipped down a little bit, so let's just grab that, pull it back up again. There we go. And now in the 2D view we want to start to draw out our pattern for the top. So I'm going to use, whoops, not the internal line, I'm going to use the polygon, and I'm going to draw it out a little bit bigger than the actual line. So I'm going to start at the center, try and match that angle a little bit. There we go, and bring that up and round and down. There we go. Now I'm going to need a new material for this, so I'll create a new material, drag and drop that on, and then we'll unfold it with linked symmetric editing rather. So right click and unfold with symmetric editing. Now this piece is sort of nowhere near right. So let me just eyeball it. I'm going to move that up to accommodate for the shoulders, and we'll pop some curvature in this neck piece, not too much. Can always adjust that in a minute, and a little bit of curvature for the arm piece. There we go. And let's select this and right click and copy, and right click and mirror paste, pop that over the back, and now we can start to sew it up and adjust it. So sew it up, we'll go to segment sewing, so side to side and strap to strap. There we go. Now I'll select the back, Shift F, and then arrange it. There we go. Just move this out of the way so I can see the points. There we go. Okay, so Shift F to turn those off again, and now I can sew it to the actual bodice itself. Now these pieces I'm going to want to sew somewhere around the middle, so we're going to use perhaps free sewing, and I'm going to sew quite a way over on the front piece and then just sew it exactly to that line. I'm deliberately making it bigger because now I want it to deform, I want it to be a bit strange, I want it to sort of bunch and balloon and fold. And then we'll do the side. So for the side I just want that to go, whoops, need to get a little bit closer there. Let's try that again. I'd want that to go only about halfway. And then we'll do the back. So I'm going to go most of the way and then just to there, and then for this piece we're going to do that to the middle. There we go. Okay, one handy thing to do here is just to freeze the bodice so it doesn't move around too much or at all, and then press space to let that sim. There we go, and that's not far off. Actually, that's not better than I could have hoped, but you know, it could be very worse. Okay, let's adjust the back a little. Just going to grab this point and move it upwards. I'm going to use these handles to soften that curve a little bit. And press space. Let it sim. Just give it a little pull here and there. I'm going to pay attention to the underarms here, because if somebody needs to rig this, I don't want these things to be too close to that arm joint. So on this back one, I'm going to grab this bottom curve point and pull it backwards. And I'm just going to straighten that one a little bit. And that's going to give me a little bit of extra room between the the shoulder and the arm joint to try and give somebody half a chance of rigging it properly. Okay, so the front, this is a little bit messed up, so I'm just going to grab this point and move it down and in to get that more straight, or more of a U shape rather than a V shape. Whoops, I thought the sim was running there. There we go. Okay, so that's the start of the shirt. When we come back, we'll do some adjustments to it to make it a little better. So I'll talk to you. Okay, so having a look around, it's not too bad, but there's one thing I do want to do, and that's just adjust these arms on the front. So I'm just going to pull that sort of more straight and down, and I'm going to pull that one down just a little bit. I'm going to hit space to see how that affects things, and then that gives me a reasonably nice shape, but it's a bit kind of baggy. And what I'm going to do for that is I'm going to select each of my lines and turn elastic on, making sure that the sim is off. So when I turn elastic on, it defaults to 80. That's percentage of original length. So for the percentage of the original length, of course, with elastic, if you go lower, the lower you go, the shorter the line will be compared to its starting point. If you put it at 100, it will try and maintain the original length, and if you go higher to 200%, it will try and double it, so you can get lots of different effects that way. But putting it at 100 will mean it will try and maintain its original length of 440, whereas its 3D line length is 467, making it a little bit baggier. So let's press space and see if that makes a difference to us, and it does. It pulls that in quite nicely. Okay, it's got a little bit of a baggy thing going on here, and we can adjust that a little bit by adjusting our size. So if I grab that and move it in, it's going to shorten this line, and as I press space and let it sim, that should actually start to make a difference. I tend to do it just a little bit at a time to try and control it. If I do it too much, you get too broad a change and you can't really tell what's going on. There we go. Now that's pulling everything a little bit forward, so I'm going to adjust the back, whoops, similarly to accommodate that, and that should straighten that up a little bit. There we go. Now we've got quite a nice armhole to sew to. There we go. What else do I want to do? I don't think I want to do an awful lot else, really. It's come out quite nicely. There are things which you can do, with, say, the shrinkage warp and shrinkage weft. If you want this to be a little bit more baggy, for example, and you've selected all of your pattern pieces, we can change the shrinkage weft, and this I believe will do the kind of horizontal size. So if I made that 150, it's going to make the pattern size 1.5 times bigger. Now this is useful, especially in if you're taking this out to rig it somewhere else or use it for morphs, because it maintains the pattern mesh, so the mesh doesn't change. If you rescale the mesh physically, it will change, but with this it doesn't. So that's perhaps not what I was after there, so let's take that down to 100. Now the warp then does the vertical size, so if I increase this to 150, it will get 150% bigger vertically. And again, you can combine these to get an effect you want. So I want to make it a little bit more baggy, so I'm going to make it 110% on its warp. Maybe let's try 110 on its weft. There we go. Doesn't seem to have made an awful lot of difference, but again, I try and do it in small steps to get the effect I want. So one of the effects I've had on this is now I've got a few more kind of nice folds on the front, which are more consistent with tucking a loose shirt into a tight bodice. Okay, so what should we do next? Next we'll attach an arm piece, I think. I'm not going to do a full arm on this. I'm going to do a bit of a cheat trick, which is just going to cover the kind of shoulder piece with a bit of fabric. Okay, so I shall talk to you then. Okay, so the eagle-eyed among you may notice that this is a slightly different pattern because while I was recording the bit to put the arm on, my Marvelous Designer crashed, and I hadn't saved it. So let that be a lesson to you. Always save your work regularly. Okay, so let's put an arm on this. So what I'm going to do is find out my lengths here and here to find the full length. So that's 486. So let's create a rectangle which is 486 wide, and say, I don't know, 100 just to start off with. Okay, so now we'll turn on our arrangement points with Shift F. Of course, there we go. Sorry, I worried that Marvelous Designer was going to have a fit on me again, because that's when it crashed last time. Right, so let's find this pattern piece and wrap it around the arm there. There we go. So if I just sew this to this, it's not going to work all that well as a flat piece. So what I'm going to do is just turn the arrangement points off because they're annoying, and then click on here to find the top. So here's the top, and what I'm going to do is use a curve tool, so edit curvature, just curve that upwards, and then I'll rewrap it. So Shift F, and then we'll rewrap it on that point. There we go. So I'm trying to get it kind of as close as possible to this curve as I can. So I'm just going to push that up a little bit, somewhere around there. Let's rearrange it, and then Shift F to turn off the arrangement points. Okay, so that's quite a lot, and yeah, the sleeve's going quite a way down, and it's wrapping over itself a lot as well, so we might want to deal with that. Let us just grab this piece and double click on the middle. I'm just going to make it a little bit skinnier. Probably okay. That's probably about right. Okay, so now I want to sew these things together. So what I'm going to do is, with my sewing tool, we'll use an M to N. There we go. So this is my main one, and these are my end ones. And I've done that completely wrong, so I'll press escape. So select your first, so that's your starting point, and then press enter, and I want to sew that to that, and then press enter again. Now I'm going to have a look at the sewing lines. It probably helps to turn the avatar off here, so select the avatar and Shift A, and I can see that they are thoroughly reversed. Okay, so I need to do that in the opposite direction. So let me just use undo a couple of times. So I started this side and pressed enter, and I started here last time, so I'm going to start here this time. So there to there, and enter again. And now I think I'm looking much better. Excellent. Okay, so if I press space, that will start to sew. And I've got the wrong material on this, so let me pop that material on there. And now I have an arm, and I can sew up the sides, or sew up the bottom rather. Oops, not with the edit tool. There we go. Press space. And we have a sleeve, or at least kind of a, you know, a short sleeve at least. Now it's a little bit weird in that it's pulling itself around quite a lot, so I'm just going to pull it up. I want it to gather a little bit, and maybe it's a little loose at the bottom, so with edit pattern, if I just push these ends in ever so slightly just to taper those off, that should tighten them up a little bit. There we go. Right, so it's Shift A to get the avatar back. I think I might perhaps need to go a little bit further in this side. Press space. There we go. Now we're talking. Now this piece I think I'm going to extend up a little bit. Whoops, with Shift held down. I just want to give it a little extra kind of length so that it can gather at the top and not pull at the bottom of the armpit quite so much. There we go. Okay, so now I need to copy this. So right click and copy, and right click and mirror paste. If I want to make sure that these are symmetrized, I'll right click here and symmetric pattern with sewing. You see that's popped the sewing back in over this side, which makes my life much easier. I'll move that inwards a little bit and press space, and there we are. Okay, so that's our arms. I think they might be a little bit long, so well, long for what I want anyway. So let's just move those up a little bit. Might just try and even up these seam lines here by making this a little longer. So that's 109, that's 107. I'd have sworn that this one was shorter, but there you go. So let's just move this point out a little bit. 104, 103.8, it's pretty close. Right, okay, so next then we'll add a little bit to these arms, and add something around the neck just to make this look a little nicer. So I'll talk to you. Okay, so for a little bit of extra feature on this, I want like a ruffle around the neck, and I want a ruffle on the arms. Whoops, I thought Sim was going there, sorry. Let's run the Sim, just put that a little bit that way. There we go. Okay, so how big is the neck? Now, I don't really care because I'm not matching it. I want to make it deliberately bigger so that it pulls in and ruffles. So let's create a rectangle. So I'm just going to create a long, thin rectangle, which is going to be much, much longer than my pattern piece, and then we'll sew it in. So I'm going to use end-to-end segment sewing, and I'll click there and press enter, and then I'm going to click around here. Now, depending upon whether I want this at the back or the front, I want it at the back definitely, so I'll start there, and then its corresponding front piece, and just carry on round, and then press enter, and there we go. Now if I now right click on this and superimpose side, it will go more or less into place, and then I'll press space and it will go into place. There we go, it will sim and go nicely. Now there is a little bit of a trick here that we can use to stand this up a little. If I just turn the sim off and then go to this fold arrangement tool, I can click on a seam and angle it a little bit, and you'll see that's gone a little bit nuts, but in theory if I press the space bar and then just pull this a little to bring it out, it should stand up ever so slightly, and I can pull it around. Sometimes it needs a little help to come upwards. There we go. That turn tool is much easier on things that aren't quite sewn like this, but it's very handy at times. There we go. Let me put this on thick, textured. There we go. Now that's what that looks like. Now I think I may have made that a little too large, so let me just double click on this middle point so I get universal scaling and just bring one side in a little bit. We should see at the back that pulls inwards. Now I'll press space and let that sim, and the last thing to do of course is to sew up the back. So go to segment sewing, I'll just sew one side of the back to the other, not like that because I completely missed. There we go, one side of the back to the other. Be more careful this time. There we go. So now we have a nice kind of ruffled neck. I'm going to put this into some more advanced rendering so you can see it a little better. There we go. Now it all looks a bit jaggedy at the minute, and that's largely because of our mesh density, but we'll adjust that a little bit later. Okay, so let's do similarly on the arms. So I want a rectangle that's longer than my piece, and then this is going to be much easier. I'll just sew that to that, and I'll select this piece, right click, copy and mirror paste, and then select them both, right click and symmetric pattern with sewing. Right click on our pattern piece, superimpose side, and the same on the other side, superimpose side, and then let that sim. And now I've got a little kind of roughly sleeve piece, which is quite nice. If you want to make it bigger, to make it ruffle more, because the larger the size difference, the more effect we'll get. There we go. You can just extend that over. Oops, don't know what happened there. F to focus. It will get us close to where we were. There we go. That's a bit nicer. Now I'm still thinking this sleeve is a little too long, so I just want to push that back upwards a little bit. There we go. Let's pull that up, get a bit more gathering at the, a bit more ballooning at the top, and then last thing, I'll just close this up by sewing the ends of those sleeve ruffles together. There we go. Okay, so what else do we want to do? Well, I want to make a little change to this bodice. I want to curve it at the front a little bit, and we want to refine our mesh a little bit more, and maybe put some other details in, but we'll see. Okay, so I'll talk to you in the next bit. Okay, so I've known from the start that I've always wanted to round this point out, but I wanted to sew the shirt on first. So what I've got here is, if I use the smooth curve tool, I can left click on this point and just drag down, and that will curve that out. Give it a moment. There we go. And then I'll do a similar job on the shirt. I'm going to make it a little bit longer though, and then press space to let that sim, and there we go. Just going to pull that up a little bit. I'm going to attempt something here I haven't tried, because I've only just thought about it, to just rotate this out a bit. So let's go to our rotate, or our fold arrangement tool. Going to click on this seam and this seam, whoops, and just move that out ever so slightly, and press space, and I'm just going to do that a couple of times on both those sides. And my aim is to just have it kind of puffing a bit across the top. I might not have quite enough material for that, but at the center is definitely doing it, so that's good. Now in doing that, I seem to have messed my ruffle up, so let's right click on that and superimpose. There we go, and that's brought that out a little bit. Lovely. Just going to pull it around a bit to get it to fall as I want it to. There we go, just pulling it out a little bit. That's a good angle to do that from. Sometimes the angle you're doing it from makes as much difference as what you're doing. Let's go onto the side here. Just try and pull this forward and down. There we go. And often you'll find that as you're doing it in one way, it's just messing up the rest of it. So yeah, just be careful with it. If you pull it too far, it will go nuts. There. Okay. So right, let's start to increase our point distance then, so that we get a little nicer result. I'm just going to select all of these. Actually, just a little trick: if you select one panel and right click, you can select with the same property and go to fabric, and it'll select all those pieces. And let's take that down to 10. That's going to give us a much finer mesh. Let's see what the bodice is set at. That's at 20. I'm going to set that to 10 as well. I'd like to keep them all to 10, or all matching, because when they sew together, you tend to get points, lots of triangular points, if the mesh density is different. But if it's the same, it sews much nicely and gives you a nicer little mesh. But sometimes, especially on big bits like this, 10 might be too much, so you might have to compromise. But I think my machine will cope with it. Yeah, I think it may be. It's locked up for the moment. Obviously, the more, the finer your mesh gets, the harder it's going to be on your machine. So let's hit the space bar. Let that sim, and that should look much nicer. Eventually, when it decides to do something, again, the lower down you go, the harder it's going to be on your machine. You've probably got a better machine than I have, so you can cope with it, but if not, you might have a bit of trouble. Okay, so what else do we want to do? Well, actually, the one thing I would like to do is actually put some detail on this bodice, because at the moment it's a bit boring. There's sort of nothing to it. So when I come back, I'm going to put a couple of pieces down the centre here, and then we'll tie up this thing and give it some sense of reality at least. Okay, so I shall talk to you then. Okay, so what I want to do down this front piece is put two flaps, if you like, which I'm going to bind together. So we'll do that with an internal polyline, and if I draw, say, from top to bottom and double click, I've lost my symmetry because I put this curve in, so I'll just have to do the same on the other side. There we go. And now that is how long? Good question. Let's select that line. 288.9 millimeters. So I'll create a rectangle which is 288.9 high, and let's go 75 width. Whoops, I've got those the wrong way around, so I'll just cut that and paste that there, and then 75. There we go. 75. Now that's too much, let's go 50. Okay. I need the original fabric on there, and then we can sew it up. So let's sew from this side to this line. Then if I right click on this piece, I can superimpose over, and that should pop it over the top of our original bodice piece when it wakes up. This is where I regret reducing my count so much, particle distance anyway. Okay, so what I want to do is copy this now, so right click, copy, right click, mirror paste. Let it paste in there. Eventually, come on. There we go. And then select both, right click, symmetric pattern with sewing, and then I'll sew this piece to this piece. There we go. Just pop that in place and press space. Oh, it's really slowing down now, and I might change my pattern particle distance back just to recover a little bit. One trick actually is if I select the skirt, which is perhaps my major piece here, and deactivate pattern and sewing, it should take that out of the simulation and make some things a bit quicker. So let's try that and see how it goes. Okay, so with that done, I've got these two flaps, but what I want to do is actually have some holes in here that I can thread something through. So what I'm going to do is go to my internal ellipse tool and create some holes. So I'm just going to zoom in here, and find a spot and draw out a suitable hole. If I press shift, it will continue to, it will be a circle rather than an ellipse, and then that will pop that there. That's lovely. And then if I double click on this to select it, press Control C, Control V, and then if I use shift to constrain the axis and come down a certain way and then right click, now I can set the interval to say 50 and increase my number of holes until it's about right. So I want this one to be a little higher, so 50 is going to be too much, so I'll just bring that up to say 45, no, 47, there we go, 47 and 5. And because I symmetrize these patterns, now they are appearing on the other side, which is perfect. So next thing I want to do, because this is going to be some outrageous cheating, is cut these holes in. So just selecting each one, and I'm going to right click and cut and sew, because I don't want to lose them. I want to be able to utilize them in this pattern. And when it comes back again, eventually, there we go. So easiest thing to do here is just move this out of the way and move that out of the way. Actually, I'll move that side. Okay, so to attach something to here, I need an internal line. So let's go to the internal line tool, and I'm just going to draw one vertically there, from top to bottom on each one of these. And this will make sense in a minute, I absolutely promise. I'm not sure I got it on the last one. No, I didn't. There we go. Okay, in an attempt to make this a little bit clearer, I'm just going to add a new fabric. And for this fabric, I want to have the same parameters as this one. So, it's already got the trim full grain leather on it. Is that one? No, it doesn't have the trim full grain leather on it. So let's pop that on there. So I want it to be the same, so I want it to maintain the pattern shape. So trim full grain leather, there we go. And we'll pop that onto all of our pieces here. Now if I select all of these pieces, I can then use this button to apply it to all of them at the same time. Now the reason I want this to be different is because I want an opacity on this. So on this fabric, we'll go down to our texture properties and our opacity, and I don't want an opacity map, I just want the opacity to change. So it's 100% opaque at the moment, so if I turn it down to 0% opaque, it will become invisible, which is perfect. Okay, so that's setting up the panels to take some like a ribbon tie, but in the next video or next couple of sections we're going to tie it up to make it work. So I'll talk to you then. Okay, so I need to do a bit of thinking here, and that's about levels, or layers rather. So all of these pieces I would definitely want to be above the bodice, and the bodice is at 0. So theoretically I would put it to 1, but I want something else to be underneath it and above the bodice. So for that thing I want that to be on level 1, and this I want to be on level 2. So let me put 2 in there. And now we're going to create the kind of over ribbon pieces. So I want a rectangle which is the same height as this line. So this line is 14 millimeters, so I need a line which is going to be 14 millimeters high and maybe 50 millimeters across. Might be too small, might be too big, but we can adjust it and click OK. So let's move that into place, and now I see that I've done that on an internal line. So let's try that again with an actual polygon. 50 wide, 14 high. Okay. Or perhaps not. Oh no, it's because I've got it on this fabric, you see. I need a new fabric, and then if I drag and drop that on there, now it looks like a proper polygon. There we go. Okay, so this needs to sew to here, and this to here, and this layer needs to be above it, so it needs to be 3. And if I go and grab this piece and put it somewhere about in the right place, I can gauge, you know, the size, and it's a little bit too short. So double click on the middle piece to get symmetric scaling, and I'm just going to increase that a little bit, and eventually it will catch up with me. Maybe, possibly. There we go. Okay, so let's move that a little closer, and then press space. There we go, and now that's added up. That was complaining a little bit down there at the moment, but that seems to have sorted itself out. Lovely, it often does. So that's our kind of over ribbon for the top one, and of course I need those all the way down. So what we're going to do is right click and copy, and then Control V, and then you just constrain that, just click, whoops, wrong click, let me undo, come on, undo, you swine, I know you're doing something, come on, there we go. So Control C, Control V, move it down, right click, and now I want to increase my patterns until I get enough. I think I'll put this about 46 just to get the spacing roughly right, perhaps 47, and then OK. And now I've got all the pieces I need, and I can just go about sewing those up. So that one to that one, that one to that one, and so on and so forth. Whoops, boring bit, isn't it? There we go. And press space, let it sim, and it should just settle in nicely. Eventually. I'm going to change for particle distance, I think. There we go. So there we have a tie, and you could leave it there. You know, that's perfectly fine. But if you want to take it a step further, we can do the same, but behind and angle our ribbon pieces. So we're going to do that in the next piece. But just before we go anywhere, I'm just going to select all of my pattern pieces for the bodice itself. So select a similar fabric, and then I'm going to stick this back up to maybe 15, which will make a bit of a difference on my current performance issues. Okay, so in the next one we'll do the back of these, so I'll talk to you then. Okay then, so I'm going to use these as the basis for our next pieces, so I'm just going to move these out of the way for the moment, and then Control C, Control V, and pop them back again. Now these ones are going to go behind, so I'm going to set that to level 1, but I also want them to join across, or form a cross shape rather than go straight across. So I'm just going to select one side, and then with constraint on, I'm going to move them down. I'm going to try and move them down. Going to move them down just like that. I've done it in 2 steps just to make sure nothing works, nothing goes particularly wrong, I'm trying to say. Right, I'm just going to hide these pieces. So select them, right click, hide, and then we're going to put these in place. So, or these in place rather. So this one, you'd think I would sew up to the top one. I'm having trouble selecting today. Let's try that again. There we go. Just going to move those into spot. Oops, I've selected something I didn't want to. There we go, that's better. Just move those into place. Roughly into place so I can see what's what. So let's try this. So if I sew that one to that one, just making sure it's tying up to the same piece, and this one to this one, so that one to that one, this one to this one, and so on and so forth until I've got to the bottom. Now when I get to the bottom, I'm going to have one extra piece, so we'll delete that when we get there. So for this one, it's not going anywhere, so I can delete this one. There we go. Now if I select all these pieces again, I can now right click and superimpose under, and when it wakes up, I think I might have to change my shirt particle distance as well. It's just too much for my poor old machine. There we go, now it's in place, and if I press space, they should relax out a little bit. You may want to perhaps shorten them, so let's double click on the middle and just shorten them a little bit. There we go, just to, you know, make them look a little bit more sensible, or realistic rather. Come on, when you're ready. There we go. Let me just select all of the shirt and see what I can do with that. Let's turn the sim off so it doesn't feel quite so sluggish. Right click, select all with the same property of fabric, and I'm going to put that up to 20. I'm going to put them all back in the end, but at the moment it's just too much. Still seems too much. Oh well. I'll just have to put up with it. Right, so what I want to do now is essentially the same, but I want to flip these over. So let me move these out of the way so we can do the other side. I'll perhaps move those down a bit. And then right click, copy, right click, mirror paste. And now these should go in the opposite direction. Let's pop those down there. There we go, and then we can sew them up. So from there to there, just make sure on the 3D view that that's happening. When I was practicing, I'd managed to get these the wrong way around. So when I thought I was sewing in the correct direction, I absolutely wasn't. And that caused me to have to redo work, which I never liked doing. There we go. If I select all of these pieces, we can right click, superimpose under. Yeah, still not changed. Yeah, I think I must have messed my machine up somehow. It's quite possible that I've just overtaxed my memory. There's some sort of memory leak or some craziness happening somewhere. Okay, so just press space to let that settle, and there we go. That's our inner ties. And now when we unhide our outer ties, or rather just right click over here and show all 3D patterns. There we go, we have a nicely tied up sort of bodice piece. You can expand upon that. You can, maybe put a tie at the end or somewhat along those lines, but for the purposes of the video I think I'm going to leave that there. Okay, so in the next bit I think all I'm going to do is set my pattern things, set my pattern particle distances, and just have a general look around, perhaps apply some actual kind of visual materials to these things to make it look nice. Okay, so I'll talk to you then. Okay, so let's see where we are. So I want to reactivate the skirt and set all the particle distances. So let's set all the particle distances. I think 10 was a little bit, how can I put it, overconfident. So I'm going to try 15. So we'll let that rearrange itself. So when you're changing the particle distances, it has to remesh every piece, so it can take a moment or two. And then for the skirt, select those skirt pieces, right click and activate. Whoops, it's gone the other way. Oh dear, it's going to be one of those days. Right click and activate. There we go. Okay, so that looks okay as it is. Just press space, let it just settle resim with its new particle distance size. And now I think, I'm pretty happy with it. It looks pretty nice. But we need to add some sort of textures to this. So let's be sensible and rename things. So this is the bodice. This will be the skirt part. Whoops, didn't want that bit. Name skirt. I have a feeling these are all going to be redone in a minute as I change the add some of the PBR materials to them, the substance materials. What's this one? That's the opaque bit. That's the the trans channel, and this one is the ribbon then. Okay. So the ribbon itself, that one's not, I'm not going to change that too much, but I'm going to change its type from matte to silk stroke satin, and then perhaps we'll give it a different colour of a green. There we go. To match that, I'm going to make the skirt a greeny colour, so let's go to substance, and I'm going to take this WSBSAR because that's quite a nice one to use, and we'll apply that to the bodice. And then of course, because not the bodice, I didn't want to do it to the bodice, I want to do it to the skirt. Oh dear, one of those mornings this morning. I'm clearly not thinking particularly well. There we go. So I'm just going to zoom in here and have a look at the kind of size of it. See these kind of stripes in it are giving us a little bit of pattern. That's quite nice. And yeah. Okay, what else do we want for the shirt? Well, let's rename this. There we go, just rename that back to skirt. For this shirt, I might use a kind of a rough-ish fabric. Perhaps this one here. Drag and drop that on. And it comes out blue, but if we look in our properties, we should be able to change that. So let's have a look. So it actually doesn't appear to be giving us any options. I get this sometimes where it doesn't quite give you all the options, which I find a little bit strange, and now it's not opening things, which indicates to me that it might actually crash in a minute. So I'm just going to hit save there just to make sure I get that. If you can hear that scuttling noise there, that was the dog coming down the stairs at a usual rate of knots. There we go. Okay, let me select a different one and then reselect it, because I find that can do it sometimes, and it has. Hurrah! We'll look under custom properties, then we get our colour parameters, and I'm going to take this blue and really knock the saturation out of it. There we go. So the texture itself is maybe a little large, so I'm going to go down to the transformation properties, select lock aspect ratio, and let's take that to 125, so that will halve it. And if that's still too big, which I think it is, 75, that's a bit more like it, I think. There we go. So we have quite a nice sort of medievalish bodiced dress to play with. I know this has been a bit of a waffle. It's gone on for a while. Thank you if you've stayed to the end. But I hope you got something good out of it, and I hope you have a great day and lots of fun making things. And I'll talk to you in another set.